my good sirs and ladybirds, welcome to my channel. My name is Danny and I make videos about my journey to recovery and the life that I lived and the things that I did along the way. And one of those things was going to jail. And that's actually how I got clean, because from jail I went to rehab, and that's how I got involved in the whole recovery process. I had been using drugs for like 10 years at that point, basically all of my adult life. And I did not think I needed help. I did not want help, but I was out of control. I was 100% out of control. And the weekend before I got locked up, the events that led me to get locked up is the most out of control that I've ever been in my whole life. And talking about it and looking back on it is very hard for me. Making this video is very hard for me. I really wish I didn't have to make this video, but it was such a pivotal moment in my life that I feel like it's necessary. And also, it's like a textbook example of why you should not do drugs. There is a lovely article online that immortalizes my criminal actions, and it says, and I quote, "Officials believe that at least one and maybe both of the defendants were using the money to fuel a drug habit." So let me just go ahead and clear up any doubt. We were on drugs. We were on crystal meth, to be exact. So crystal meth was not my drug of choice, but I had been using it here and there in the past couple of years because my boyfriend at the time used it. So when I did use it, it was with him. And he was very sparing with the amount that I used. So we would only do like a couple lines a night. And those few lines blew my mind. Using crystal meth evokes a feeling of like euphoric happiness. Everything that you say, everything that you do, everything that you think of is the most powerful, amazing, groundbreaking, wonderful, genius thing that's ever been done before. And in that regard, it's a very dangerous drug because it makes you feel untouchable and invincible. All the times I had done crystal meth up to that point, I had done it with my boyfriend at the time, so he really watched my back and gave me a safe space to use it in. And unfortunately, I was not with my boyfriend at the time during this weekend. So I don't even remember how I met the two people that I was with, but I know the older one, let's call him Barry. Okay, Barry had this like decrepit old like camper van, like those old Econo lines, the one with like the curtains on the windows and the big like plush captain chairs with like cigarette holes in them and like stinky shag carpet, right? So I was working at a strip club in downtown Philadelphia, and I was living in the dorm room on the backside of the racetrack in Bensalem, and I only had a motorcycle at that time, and I did not feel like putting all my stripper gear and 10 layers on to drive my motorcycle to the strip club. So I called up Jerry, and I'm like, "Hey Jerry, can you give me a ride?" So he came and picked me up in this monstrosity of a vehicle, and he had Tim with him. Let's call him Tim. So he had Tim with him. And at that point, I was coming off like a 1 week heroin and coke binge where I had been really using a lot. And I was telling myself, hey, you need to slow down, because like my body was getting fatigued and I just felt really burnt out. I had been working a lot and using a lot and drinking a lot. So I was just telling myself, you know what, you're just going to go to work. I think it was a Friday. You're just going to go to work. You're just going to, have a couple drinks and then come home and clean yourself up, because I was going to go down and spend time with my family over the weekend. But when those little goons pulled up in that decrepit van, the second I got in, I could sense that they had some drugs on them. And when they offered them to me, or when I asked, I don't remember which, all my good intentions went out the window. So they gave me a little bit of crisp powder and I used it. And they gave me some in a dollar bill so I could use it throughout my shift at the club. So I worked my shift at the club, and then they came and picked me up. I actually wrote an outline of everything that happened, and it's still really hazy after trying my best to remember the whole timeline of everything. So I don't know like a sequence of certain events, but I do know that we ended up at Parks Casino, and I remember at one point we had like the dollar slots up to $2,000. We didn't leave the casino with $2,000. We left the casino with $0, and I had actually blown all the money that I had made working at my shift at the strip club. And I remember I was either one or two withdrawals of $100 that I made while I was at the casino. So I blew a lot of money. And then we ended up at Jerry's house. Now, Jerry was an older guy, so he kind of looked like Santa Claus, but like a methed out roadkill version of Santa Claus. And he lived in like this weird, decrepit apartment. So Jerry and Tim were both habitual users. So the amount that they used was like multiples of what I had used at that time with my then boyfriend. Jerry and Tim not only were smoking it, but they were smoking a lot of it. And I just went along with it. Like, I was like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever, man, I'm down, let's do it. Like, I was on a substance that made me feel like I was invincible. So this is where the events of the night get kind of hazy, because we just kept on using more and more, and my mind got really overloaded. But I remember at one point we had driven to New Jersey to sell or buy some more stuff. And there's actually one point where the guy that we met up, and then we're going to drive somewhere else. And we were going 80 down the highway, passing the pipe back and forth between our vehicles. Like, we thought we were out of control, like 80 down the highway, driving right next to each other, passing the pipe between cars. So we ended up back at Jerry's house, and we kept on using. I think we used up everything that we had. And Tim was like, yo, before we can get more of the substance, I need to go do some stuff. And I'm like, bugging out of my mind. The last thing in the world that I wanted to do was go back to my little cinder block dorm room by myself when I'm so super high. So I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Like, I can help. No problem. Like, whatever needs to be done, like, I'm there. Let's go. This is what he told me. He was responsible for cleaning out the side of his grandparents' cemetery. What? And he had the company vehicle, which was like a minivan. So we got in that minivan and drove to his grandparents' cemetery. And there was like this little side yard that was chain link fenced off, like the kind of chain link fence that has like the green mesh woven through it. There was like a gate with a padlock, and he unlocked the padlock and drove the van inside. So this side yard was full of like rusted out cars and like metal tool sheds. And there was a pile over the side of like headstones, like a massive pile of headstones all piled on top of each other. And there were some that were broken, some had the plaques on top of them. But so he told me that he was there because he had to salvage these headstones, and that they were either damaged, or that the plaques were misprinted, or that the people had ordered them and never paid for them. So he was supposed to take all the scrap metal and salvage it and bring, and like that was his job. So he wandered off to one of like the metal storage containers that were there and rustled around for a bit and came back with some tools, and then took off two of the brass plaques that were marking these broken headstones on the ground. He was all ready to go. And I'm like, where are you going? Like, I was not thinking at that time. I was so hyped out of my mind on the substance that my brain was basically shut off. So I was like, hey man, I'm here. Like, let's work. Let's do this. So me and him took off like a lot. Like, I think it was like 20 of these things, and they weighed like 100 to 200 pounds each of pure brass, and we loaded them up in the back of his van, and off we went. So he drove like a couple miles down the road to the salvage place that he told me that he had been at before, because he had salvaged a couple of these plaques a couple of days ago. They had taken it wouldn't be a problem. So we roll up in there, and I think it was like 6:30 or 7 in the morning at that point, and they wanted nothing to do with us. They wanted nothing to do with us. They said that because there was some legality involved with salvaging this kind of stuff, because there was a lot of thefts going on, so they didn't want to get involved. So we ended up going all the way down to Kensington in Philadelphia, which is Kensington's where they basically have like an open drug market. And a couple miles down away from that, they have this giant salvage yard. You can actually drive down the road where that salvage yard is, and you'll see people with shopping carts full of scrap metal going to salvage stuff so they can go get their substances. And that's where we went with this van full of brass headstone plaques. They didn't really want to deal with us either. So they said that we needed documentation, which Tim had in the glove box of the company vehicle, saying that he was an employee and this was a company vehicle. At that point, they wanted an ID. And Tim somehow did not have an ID with him. And I, being such a nice and wonderful person, let them make a copy of my ID.
What an idiot!
Yeah. He got a lot of money for it. It was like a good couple thousand. I think it was like $4,000 or $5,000, maybe more. And away we went. Away we went. I remember that we went to Target and I met up with one of my regulars from the strip club. I was still out of my mind on crystal meth at that point, but I thought I was fine.
This is fine.
So that's how I ended up getting onto a train to go down to see my family in Virginia, but I never made it there. I got off the train in DC because I wanted to score some heroin, and that's how I ended up wandering through not only DC, but Philadelphia for the next 24 hours. Going to a stranger's house party, wandering around abandoned houses, and getting robbed. Thinking about what could have happened to me wandering around in that state of mind, I am still just horrified and just incredibly thankful that nothing happened to me. But that whole adventure is a story for another day. Hopefully never. So I ended up back in Bensalem, but I still didn't go home. I ended up crashing on the sofa of the father of the ex-girlfriend of Jerry's, right? I don't really remember how I got there, but I do know that I stayed there for like the next 2 days. And at that point, I was getting kind of dope sick and I didn't have any clothing and I was running out of money. So I called that one of my regulars from the strip club to come pick me up. And he took me out to get some pizza. And then I like finagled like $50 from him to go buy some stuff with. And that's how I ended up back at Jerry's house. He told me that he had some perks. So I gave him $50 for some pills and I got in the car and we were driving away and I realized that he had sold me Tylenol. So I told my customer, turn around, we're going back there. Jerry's door did not work because I'd been kicked in through a raid by the police like before I had met him. And so I like was like banging on the door and I'm like, Jerry, open the door, give me my money back, or I will kick this down. So he opened it up, he gave me my money back, and then I went to a friend of mine, and through that friend, I got some methadone pills, and I finally made it back to my dorm room. A day or two later, I got a call from Jerry's ex-girlfriend saying that the police had been looking for me at her dad's house. And I was like, what could be going on? So I had a friend give me a ride to the police station so I could see what was going on and try to clear it up. And when I got there, they said that they had some questions for me about what had happened over the weekend with Jerry at his grandparents' cemetery and what had been going on with the plaques. And I answered all the questions because I never thought that it would be anything serious. And after having a very polite conversation back and forth with the police officers, they very nicely told me that I was under arrest. So they put me in a jail cell, and it was like the next day that I talked to a judge, and it was there that I learned that I had 5 felonies and 2 misdemeanors against me. And right after that, I was shipped off to county jail. So the charges ended up getting dropped while I was at my second rehab because the grandparents never really wanted to press charges. They had been looking for Jerry for like a couple weeks at that point, and he had like continually gone back to their property and taken those plaques and salvaged them like on several different occasions. And they had been calling and looking for him, and they had just gotten to the point where they called the police because they were so worried about him. and they couldn't stop him. It was just this whole thing that I put myself in the middle of because I was on crystal meth. It was a crazy, crazy weekend, and I'm sure that anybody that's abused crystal meth has a similar story. I actually got a call from somebody who was close to me on meth saying that he was being chased by the police and he had to just fight his way out of a house. And I got a call like 5 minutes later from his friend saying, so-and-so just went completely nuts, started punching people, and ran out the back door. So it makes you do crazy, crazy things. And that's the story about how I ended up in jail with 5 felonies and 2 misdemeanors against me. We have reached the end of this video, and I really hope that you enjoyed it. Give me a big thumbs up. Leave a comment down below letting me know what you think about this video. And if you subscribe, you'll be notified whenever I upload my next one. And until then, take care of yourselves. Have a good day, and I will talk to you later.